highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of gray silk, winding through hills that rolled gently into the distance. Sarah's hands rested lightly on the steering wheel. Her fingers relaxed after the first hour of driving. The radio played softly, a folk station she'd discovered somewhere between the city limits and the open country, where singers with warm voices sang about rivers and home. She'd left the city at dawn, when the streets were still quiet and the buildings cast long shadows across empty sidewalks. Now, 3 hours later, the landscape had transformed completely. Gone were the glass towers and concrete, replaced by fields of tall grass that swayed in the breeze, their golden heads nodding in rhythm with some silent music only they could hear. The inheritance had been unexpected. A great uncle she'd barely known, a man whose name appeared only occasionally in family stories told around holiday tables. He'd lived alone for decades in a cabin by a lake, and when he passed quietly in his sleep at the age of 93, he'd left the property to Sarah. The lawyer's letter had arrived on a Tuesday, formal and brief, containing a key and directions to a place she'd never seen. Sarah hadn't planned to keep it. Her life was in the city, her apartment, her work, her routines that fit together like pieces of a familiar puzzle. But something in her had stirred when she held that old brass key, feeling its weight in her palm, a whisper of possibility perhaps, or simply curiosity about this place that had meant enough to a solitary old man that he'd chosen to spend his final decades there. The GPS on her phone showed she was close now. The highway had narrowed to a 2-lane road, then to a single lane of worn asphalt. Now she turned onto a gravel drive that crunched beneath her tires, the sound rhythmic and oddly soothing. Trees lined both sides, oak and maple, their branches forming a canopy overhead that filtered the sunlight into patterns of gold and green. The drive curved gently, following the natural contours of the land. Through gaps in the trees, Sarah caught glimpses of water, bright flashes of blue that sparkled in the afternoon light. The lake. Her pulse quickened slightly, though whether from anticipation or nervousness she couldn't quite say. And then the trees opened up, and there it was. The cabin sat in a small clearing, nestled between the forest and the lake, like it had grown there naturally, a part of the landscape rather than an imposition upon it. It was smaller than she'd imagined, built of weathered wood that had aged to a soft gray, with a green metal roof and a stone chimney rising from one end. A covered porch wrapped around the front, with 2 rocking chairs positioned to face the water. Sarah turned off the engine and sat for a moment in the sudden silence. Birds sang in the trees, cardinals and chickadees, their calls clear and bright. The breeze carried the scent of pine and water, and somewhere nearby, she could hear the gentle lap of waves against a shore. She stepped out of the car, her legs stiff from the drive. The air here tasted different, cleaner somehow, with a coolness to it, despite the warmth of the day. She walked slowly toward the cabin, her footsteps soft on the packed earth. The key fit smoothly into the lock, as if the door had been waiting for her. It swung open with barely a creak, revealing a single large room with honey-colored wood walls and wide plank floors. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out over the lake, filling the space with a golden glow. To the left stood a small kitchen, simple but complete, with open shelves holding mismatched dishes and mugs. A cast-iron stove sat against one wall, its surface clean and well-maintained. To the right, a stone fireplace dominated the space, with a comfortable-looking armchair positioned nearby and a stack of books on a side table. Against the far wall, beneath a window that framed a perfect view of the lake, was a bed covered with a quilt in shades of blue and white, its pattern like waves or clouds, or perhaps both at once. Sarah set her bag down and walked to the window. The lake stretched before her, its surface calm except for the occasional ripple from a passing breeze. The far shore was lined with trees, and in the distance she could see the purple shadows of mountains against the sky. She hadn't expected to feel it so strongly, this sense of rightness, of coming to a place that had somehow been waiting for her all along. But standing there in the golden light, with the peaceful water before her and the quiet cabin around her, Sarah felt something inside her begin to relax, to release tensions she hadn't even known she'd been carrying. The rest of the afternoon passed in a gentle blur of discovery. She explored the cabin's few rooms, a small bathroom with a clawfoot tub, a tiny loft accessible by a ladder where boxes of her great-uncle's belongings sat neatly stacked. She found a shed behind the cabin containing tools and fishing equipment, a canoe hanging from the rafters, and firewood stacked along one wall. She carried her things inside, unpacked her clothes into the simple dresser, and arranged her toiletries on the bathroom shelf. Each action felt deliberate, mindful, so different from the hurried way she moved through her city apartment, always rushing to the next thing. As evening approached, Sarah sat on the porch in one of the rocking chairs. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that reflected on the lake's surface, turning the water into liquid gold. A loon called from somewhere across the water, its cry haunting and beautiful. Another answered from the opposite direction, their voices echoing across the stillness. Sarah rocked gently, the chair creaking in a rhythm that matched her breathing. The day's drive seemed far away now, like something from another life. The city, with its noise and hurry, felt distant as a dream. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the deepening blue above, Sarah went inside. She lit a lamp. Her great-uncle had electricity, but he'd kept oil lamps too, and there was something soothing about their soft, warm glow. She made tea in the small kitchen, heating water on the propane stove. The kettles whistled a cheerful sound in the quiet. She carried her mug to the armchair by the fireplace and picked up one of the books from the side table. It was an old field guide to birds, its pages worn soft from use, with her great-uncle's neat handwriting in the margins, observations, dates, small sketches. But she found herself unable to focus on the words. Her eyes kept drifting to the window, to the darkness beyond, and the faint shimmer of starlight on water. The cabin seemed to hold a silence that was different from the silence of her apartment in the city. Not the absence of sound, but rather a fullness of peace, a quietness that felt alive and breathing. Eventually, she set the book aside and moved to the bed beneath the window. The sheets were fresh. The lawyer had arranged for someone to prepare the cabin for her arrival, and the quilt was soft beneath her fingers. She lay down and looked up at the ceiling, where shadows from the lamplight danced and swayed. Through the window, she could see stars, more stars than she'd ever seen in the city, scattered across the sky like diamonds on dark velvet. The loon called again, its voice carrying clearly through the night. Sarah closed her eyes and listened to the gentle sounds of the cabin, the settling of old wood, the whisper of wind in the eaves, the distant murmur of the lake. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt truly at rest. Sarah woke to light, soft and golden, filtering through the window beside her bed. For a moment, she lay still, disoriented by the unfamiliarity of the ceiling above her, the scent of pine and water in the air. Then memory returned. The cabin, the lake, the journey that had brought her here. She sat up slowly, the quilt falling away. Through the window she could see morning mist rising from the lake's surface, pale wisps that drifted upward like spirits ascending. The water beneath was perfectly still, reflecting the sky and the trees along the far shore with such clarity that it was impossible to tell where reality ended and reflection began. The cabin was cool, the air fresh with the chill of night, not yet burned away by the rising sun. Sarah wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and padded to the kitchen in her bare feet, the wooden floor smooth and cool beneath her soles. She filled the kettle and set it on the stove, then opened the cabin door and stepped out onto the porch while she waited for the water to boil. The morning was utterly still, not silent. She could hear birds beginning their day, their songs rising from the forest like a gentle symphony, but still in a way that felt sacred, untouchable. The mist over the lake glowed golden where the rising sun touched it, and the air tasted of dew and earth and growing things. A deer emerged from the trees at the edge of the clearing, a young doe with large dark eyes. She paused when she saw Sarah, alert but not frightened, and they regarded each other for a long moment before the deer continued on her way, disappearing into the forest on the far side of the clearing with barely a sound. The kettle's whistle called Sarah back inside. She made coffee this time, finding a jar of grounds in the cupboard alongside sugar and powdered milk. The coffee was strong and dark, warming her from the inside as she cradled the mug in her hands. She carried it back outside and settled into one of the rocking chairs, tucking her feet beneath her. The mist was beginning to burn away now, revealing more of the lake, its full expanse spreading before her like a sheet of hammered silver. A small dock extended from the shore below the cabin, its weathered boards just visible through the thinning mist. Sarah found herself drawn to it. She set her mug on the porch railing and walked down the gentle slope, her feet leaving dark prints in the dew-wet grass. The dock was sturdy despite its aged appearance, the boards firm beneath her steps. She walked to the end and sat down, letting her legs dangle over the edge. The water below was so clear she could see smooth stones on the bottom, see small fish darting between them in quick silver flashes. She dipped her toes in. The water was cold, shockingly so, but after the initial gasp, it felt invigorating, alive. Tiny ripples spread outward from her feet, distorting the reflections on the water's surface before smoothing out again. How long had it been since she'd sat like this, doing nothing, thinking nothing, just being present in a moment? In the city, there was always something. A notification on her phone, a task left undone, the hum of traffic outside her window, reminding her that the world was moving and she should be moving with it. But here, time felt different, slower perhaps, or maybe just less important. The sun would rise and cross the sky and set again, whether she hurried or not. The lake would lap against the shore, the birds would sing, the trees would grow, all following rhythms far older than any clock. Sarah sat on the dock until the sun cleared the trees on the eastern shore, flooding the lake with full morning light. Then she rose, her legs slightly stiff from sitting, and made her way back up to the cabin. The rest of the morning unfolded with the same gentle ease. She ate a simple breakfast of toast and jam, standing at the kitchen counter, looking out at the water. She washed her few dishes and set them in the drainer to dry. She made the bed, smoothing the quilt until it lay flat and neat. In a closet, she found cleaning supplies and spent a pleasant hour dusting and sweeping, not because the cabin was particularly dirty, but because the simple, repetitive motions were meditative, calming. She discovered her great-uncle's belongings throughout the cabin, a pipe on the mantel, a pair of binoculars hanging by the door, a tackle box under the kitchen sink. Each item told a small story of the life he'd lived here, a life of solitude, yes, but not loneliness. She could see it in the well-worn comfort of the armchair, in the careful organization of his things, in the bird guide with its loving annotations. He had been content here, at peace with his chosen solitude. Around midday, Sarah decided to explore beyond the cabin. She found a trail leading into the forest, marked by a small cairn of stones. The path was narrow but clear, winding between trees whose trunks were thick with age. The forest here was different from any she'd known, quieter somehow, with a quality of light that seemed to glow green as it filtered through the canopy. Ferns grew in profusion, their fronds unfurling in perfect spirals. Moss covered fallen logs in cushions of emerald velvet. She walked slowly, stopping often to look and listen. A woodpecker worked on a distant tree, the rapid drumming echoing through the woods. Squirrels chattered from high branches, and once she saw a red fox, its coat brilliant as flame, watching her from behind a boulder before slipping away like a shadow. The trail climbed gradually, following a small stream that tumbled over rocks, its water crystal clear and cold. Sarah knelt beside it and cupped her hands, bringing the water to her lips. It tasted of stone and sky, pure and clean. Higher up, the trail opened onto a rocky outcrop that looked out over the lake and the surrounding hills. From here, she could see the cabin below, small and peaceful in its clearing. She could see the full expanse of the lake, shaped like a crescent moon, and the mountains beyond rising in layers of blue and purple. She sat on the warm stone and let the view wash over her. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals with barely a movement of its wings. Clouds drifted across the blue, their shadows racing across the hills like swift, silent runners. Sarah had brought her phone with her out of habit, but she'd discovered that morning that there was no signal here. No emails could reach her, no calls, no endless scroll of news and updates. The realization had caused a brief moment of panic, quickly followed by something that felt surprisingly like relief. She pulled the phone from her pocket now and looked at it, its dark screen reflecting only clouds and sky. Then, deliberately, she turned it off completely and tucked it away. The afternoon was wearing on when she finally made her way back down the trail to the cabin. The walk had cleared her mind in a way she hadn't known was possible, leaving her feeling light and clean, as if something dusty and cluttered had been swept away from inside her. She spent the rest of the afternoon in simple tasks. She brought in firewood from the shed, stacking it neatly beside the fireplace, even though the evening was likely to be warm. She examined the canoe in the shed, running her hand along its smooth hull, thinking that perhaps tomorrow she might venture out onto the water. She found a vegetable garden behind the cabin, somewhat overgrown, but still producing. Cherry tomatoes grew on vines, their fruit warm and sweet. Herbs, basil and thyme and rosemary, filled the air with their fragrance when she brushed against them. She gathered what she could, thinking she might make a simple pasta for dinner. As evening approached, Sarah returned to the porch. This seemed to be becoming a ritual already, this time of sitting and watching as day turned to night, as the quality of light changed and the world prepared for rest. The sunset tonight was different from the night before. Clouds on the horizon caught the light and held it, glowing in shades of coral and gold, and the lake reflected every color, deepening them, making them richer. The water seemed to hold fire, burning with the day's last light. She thought about her life in the city, her apartment with its view of other apartments, her office with its fluorescent lights, her days measured in meetings and deadlines and tasks checked off lists. She thought about how tired she'd been, how the tiredness had become such a constant companion that she'd stopped noticing it. The way you stop noticing a sound if you hear it long enough. Here, in just one full day, she could already feel that tiredness beginning to lift. It was like setting down a heavy bag she'd been carrying for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. The loon called again as darkness gathered, and this time Sarah smiled at the sound. It was becoming familiar, a voice that marked the passing of day into night, a song that meant home, though this place had never been home before. She went inside and lit the lamps, their warm glow pushing back the darkness. She cooked her pasta, simple but delicious, with the fresh tomatoes and herbs. She ate at the small table, looking out at the lake, now dark except where moonlight touched it, turning the water silver. After dinner, she settled into the armchair with her great-uncle's bird guide. She read about loons, how they could dive deep and stay under for several minutes, how their calls were different depending on what they wanted to communicate. She read about herons and kingfishers, about warblers and thrushes, and as she read, the margin notes in her great-uncle's hand made her feel she was learning from him directly, as if he were sitting across from her, sharing what he'd observed during his years beside the lake. Later, lying in bed with the window open to the night air, Sarah listened to the sounds of darkness, wind in the trees, the distant call of an owl, the gentle whisper of water against the shore. The darkness here wasn't frightening like the darkness of city streets could be. It was soft, complete, restful. She felt sleep approaching like a gentle wave, and for once, she didn't fight it, didn't think about all the things she should be doing instead. She simply let it come, let it carry her down into dreams of water and sky, of forests and flight, of peace that went deeper than any she'd known. Sarah woke on her third morning at the cabin without an alarm, without the jarring buzz or cheerful chime that usually yanked her from sleep. Instead, she drifted upward, gradually, naturally, pulled by the gentle light and the sound of rain. It was raining, not a heavy storm, but a soft, steady rain that whispered against the roof and the windows, that pattered on the leaves of the trees and dimpled the surface of the lake. The air coming through the open window was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. Sarah lay still for a long moment, listening. There was something deeply peaceful about rain on a roof when you were safe and dry inside, something that touched some ancient part of the brain that remembered sheltering in caves, that knew gratitude for walls and warmth. She rose slowly and wrapped herself in a sweater, then made tea and carried it to the armchair by the fireplace. Though it wasn't cold enough to need a fire, she laid one anyway, just a small one, for the comfort of it. She'd found matches in a tin on the mantel and kindling in a basket beside the hearth, and she built the fire the way some half-remembered instinct told her to, starting small and patient until the flames took hold. The fire crackled cheerfully, its warmth reaching out into the room. Combined with the sound of rain, it created a cocoon of coziness that made the cabin feel even more like a sanctuary, a place set apart from the world. Sarah curled up in the chair with her tea and simply sat, not reading, not planning, not even really thinking, just sitting, watching the fire, listening to the rain, being present in the moment. In the city, she would have felt guilty about this. Time spent doing nothing was time wasted, wasn't it? But here, somehow, it felt different. It felt necessary, even important, as if doing nothing was actually doing something vital, allowing her body and mind to rest, to repair, to remember how to simply be. The rain continued through the morning, sometimes heavier, sometimes lighter, but never stopping. Sarah moved through the day at the pace the weather dictated, slow, gentle, unhurried. She made breakfast and ate it by the window, watching rain run down the glass in rivulets, watching the lake's surface dance with a million tiny impacts. She washed her dishes slowly, mindfully, feeling the warm water on her hands, the smooth surface of the plates. She found a jigsaw puzzle in a cabinet, 1,000 pieces showing a mountain landscape, and spread it out on the table. She worked on it for an hour or more, the repetitive action of sorting pieces and fitting them together, meditative, calming. There was no pressure to finish, no timeline to meet. The puzzle would take as long as it took. Around midday, the rain eased to a drizzle. Sarah put on a rain jacket she'd found hanging by the door, presumably her great uncle's, but it fit well enough, and ventured outside. The world was transformed by rain. Colors seemed deeper, richer. The forest was a dozen shades of green, from the pale new growth to the deep emerald of pine. Water dripped from every leaf, every branch, creating a constant soft patter that was like music. She walked down to the dock and stood at its end, looking out over the rain-dimpled lake. Mist clung to the far shore, softening the trees into suggestions of themselves. The mountains beyond were completely hidden, erased by low clouds. A great blue heron stood in the shallows near the shore, motionless as a statue waiting for fish. Sarah watched it for a long time, marveling at its patience, at the way it could stand so perfectly still, so utterly focused on the present moment. After several minutes, it struck, a lightning-fast movement, and then it lifted its head with a fish silver and struggling in its beak. The heron swallowed its catch and flew away with ponderous wing beats, and Sarah returned to the cabin, her hair damp with mist, her cheeks cool and fresh. She changed into dry clothes and built up the fire again. She made soup for lunch, tomato from cans she'd found in the cupboard and ate it with crackers, the simple food satisfying in a way that restaurant meals never seem to be. The afternoon passed in a blur of quiet contentment. She worked on the puzzle some more. She looked through her great-uncle's books, not just the bird guide, but novels and poetry, books about nature and philosophy. A well-worn copy of Thoreau's Walden that opened naturally to underlined passages. She found herself reading Thoreau's words. "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." The words resonated in a way they never had when she'd read them in school. She understood now, in a way she hadn't then, what he meant. How easy it was to go through life without really living it, to be so busy surviving that you forgot to actually live. Outside, the rain picked up again, drumming harder on the roof. Sarah set the book aside and lay down on the bed, not to sleep, but just to rest, to listen. She watched the rain run down the window, creating patterns that formed and dissolved and formed again. She watched the fire burn low in the grate, the flames settling into embers that glowed red and orange. She thought about time and how different it felt here. In the city, time always seemed to be running out, always racing ahead of her while she struggled to keep up. Here, time felt expansive, abundant. There was enough of it for everything, enough to sit and watch the rain, enough to build a fire just for the comfort of it, enough to do nothing at all without feeling guilty. As evening approached, the rain finally stopped. The clouds began to break up, revealing patches of blue, and the setting sun found the gaps and poured through, turning the wet world golden. Sarah went outside to witness it. Water droplets on every surface caught the light and held it, turning the clearing into a field of diamonds. The lake steamed slightly where the sun touched it, and a rainbow arced across the sky, its colors vivid against the dark clouds behind it. She breathed deeply, filling her lungs with air that tasted clean and new, washed pure by the rain. She felt clean too somehow, as if the rain had washed more than just the air and the trees, as if it had washed something inside her as well, some accumulation of stress and hurry and worry that had been building for years. That night, she made a fire again, a bigger one this time, for the evening had turned cool after the rain. She pulled the armchair close and sat with a blanket over her lap, watching the flames dance and flicker. She thought about how much had changed in just a few days, how much quieter her mind had become, how much more present she felt in each moment. She thought about the life she'd left behind in the city, and for the first time, she allowed herself to question whether that was the life she wanted to return to. The fire burned down to embers, and Sarah banked them carefully before going to bed. She lay beneath the quilt, looking out at the night. Clear now, the stars sharp and bright after the rain. The air coming through the window was cool and sweet, and she pulled the quilt up to her chin, feeling warm and safe and deeply, profoundly at peace. Sleep came easily, as it had every night since she'd arrived at the cabin. And in her dreams, she walked through forests where rain fell eternally gentle, where every leaf held light, where time didn't matter, and peace was the only thing that had ever been real. The morning of the fourth day dawned clear and bright, the world washed clean by yesterday's rain. Sarah woke with a sense of purpose. Today she decided she would take the canoe out onto the lake. After breakfast, she walked to the shed where the canoe hung from the rafters. It was a beautiful thing, made of wood rather than fiberglass or plastic, its hull a deep green that would blend with the water. She ran her hand along its smooth surface, feeling the care that had gone into its making, into its maintenance. Getting it down took some effort, but she managed. And then she dragged it carefully across the grass to the water's edge. She found paddles in the shed, along with a life jacket that she dutifully put on and a cushion to kneel on. The canoe slid into the water with barely a sound, and Sarah climbed in carefully, settling herself in the center. The vessel rocked gently beneath her, finding its balance. And then she pushed off from the dock with her paddle. The sensation of floating, of gliding across the water, was wonderful. The paddle dipped and pulled, and the canoe moved forward smoothly, leaving barely a ripple behind. Within minutes, she found a rhythm, her body remembering skills she'd learned long ago at summer camp and hadn't used since. She paddled along the shoreline first, staying close to land, getting comfortable with the canoe's movements. The lake was calm this morning, its surface like glass, reflecting the sky and the trees with perfect clarity. She could see down into the water, could see rocks on the bottom and schools of small fish darting between them, could see aquatic plants swaying in the gentle current. A family of ducks paddled by, the mother in front and 4 fluffy ducklings in a line behind her. They regarded Sarah with bright eyes, but didn't seem afraid, and she let the canoe drift, watching them pass. Gradually, she grew bolder and paddled farther from shore, out into the middle of the lake. Here, the water was deeper, its color shifting from the clear green of the shallows to a darker blue-green that hinted at depths she couldn't see. She stopped paddling and let the canoe drift. The silence out here was profound, broken only by the occasional call of a bird or the splash of a fish jumping. The sky above was an endless blue, with just a few white clouds drifting slowly across it. Sarah lay back in the canoe, settling carefully so she wouldn't tip, and looked up at the sky. The bottom of the canoe was hard against her back, but she didn't mind. She closed her eyes and felt the sun warm on her face, felt the gentle rocking of the canoe, felt the vastness of the sky above and the water below. This was a kind of meditation, she realized. This floating, this drifting, this complete surrender to the moment. There was nothing she needed to do, nowhere she needed to be. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing. She might have dozed, she wasn't sure. But after a while, she opened her eyes and sat up, and found that the canoe had drifted quite far from where she'd stopped paddling. The cabin was a small shape on the distant shore. She picked up the paddle and began to work her way back, but without hurry. She explored as she went, paddling into coves and inlets she hadn't been able to see from land. She found a small beach of white sand, unmarked by footprints. She found a cove where lily pads floated on the surface, their white flowers open to the sun, and where dragonflies zipped and hovered in iridescent flashes of blue and green. She discovered that the lake had several small islands, most of them just large rocks with a few wind-bent trees clinging to them. On one larger island, she pulled the canoe up onto the shore and got out to explore. The island was perhaps 100 feet across, rocky and wild, with scrubby plants growing in the crevices. She climbed to its highest point and looked out over the lake, seeing it from a new perspective, seeing patterns in the way the wind moved across the water, seeing how the light changed depending on depth and angle. She sat on the warm rock and ate the lunch she'd brought, a sandwich and an apple, simple food that tasted incredible in the fresh air and sunshine. A gull landed nearby and regarded her hopefully, and she tossed it a small piece of bread, watching it catch the morsel midair with practiced ease. The afternoon was wearing on when she finally climbed back into the canoe and paddled back toward the cabin. Her arms were tired, but it was a good tiredness, the kind that came from using her body, from physical work rather than mental stress. As she approached the shore, she saw that she wasn't alone. A figure stood on the dock, a man, tall and elderly, with white hair and a weather-worn face. For a moment, Sarah felt a flutter of alarm, but the man raised a hand in greeting, his gesture friendly and unhurried, and her fear eased. She paddled to the dock, and the man steadied the canoe as she climbed out. "Beautiful day for a paddle," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. "It is," Sarah agreed. "I'm Sarah. This is my cabin now." "I know," the man said. "I'm Tom. I live just around the bend." He gestured vaguely southward. "I knew your great-uncle. We were friends. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Sarah said. "I didn't know him well, actually. It was a surprise when he left me this place." Tom nodded. He was a private man, but a good one. He loved this lake. He paused, then added, "I wanted to check on you, make sure you were settling in all right, and to tell you that if you need anything, any help with the cabin, any questions about the area, my door's always open." His kindness touched her. "That's very kind of you. I'm doing well, actually. Better than I expected." Tom smiled. "This place has a way of making people feel better. Your great-uncle used to say the lake was healing, and I think he was right." He looked out over the water, his eyes distant. "I've lived here 40 years, and I still feel grateful every morning when I wake up and see it." They talked for a while longer, Tom sharing stories about her great-uncle, about the lake and the land around it. He told her about the best fishing spots, about trails she might want to explore, about how in winter the lake froze solid and people would ice skate across it under the stars. Finally, Tom took his leave, walking up the path that Sarah realized must lead around the lake to his own cabin. She watched him go, touched by his neighborly concern, by the connection he'd had with her great-uncle. She pulled the canoe up onto the shore and returned it to the shed, her arms pleasantly tired from the day's paddling. Back in the cabin, she showered, feeling the warm water ease her muscles, washing away the sweat and lake water. That evening, she cooked a simple dinner and ate it on the porch as the sun set. Her body was tired in the best way, the kind of tired that promised deep, restful sleep. She thought about the day, the peace of floating on the water, the discovery of the islands, the unexpected kindness of Tom's visit. She thought about how, just a few days ago, she hadn't known this place existed, and now it felt like she'd always been here, like the life she'd lived before was the dream, and this quiet, peaceful existence by the lake was reality. As darkness fell and the stars emerged, Sarah went inside. She was too tired even to read, too tired for anything but sleep. She crawled into bed and was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow, dreaming of water and sky, of floating on currents that carried her gently, endlessly toward peace. Days began to flow into one another, not in a blur, but in a gentle rhythm that felt natural, unforced. Sarah woke with the sun, went to bed when darkness fell. Her life became oriented around simple things: the weather, the seasons of the day, the needs of her body for food and rest and movement. She established routines, but they were soft routines, flexible, guided by inclination rather than obligation. Most mornings, she walked the forest trail, her legs growing stronger, her lungs expanding to take in the clear air. She learned the path by heart, learned where the sun would break through the canopy at different times of day, where the stream ran fastest, where a particular rock offered the best view. She saw wildlife often now. She'd learned to move quietly, to observe without disturbing. She saw deer almost daily, sometimes alone, sometimes in small groups. She saw a bear once, from a safe distance, a black shape moving through the undergrowth. She saw foxes and raccoons, skunks and porcupines, squirrels of several kinds, and countless birds. The birds became a particular fascination. Armed with her great-uncle's field guide and his binoculars, she began to learn them, not just their names, but their habits, their songs, the times of day they were most active. She learned to identify the cardinal's clear whistle, the chickadee's friendly call, the raven's deep croak. She learned that the woodpecker's drumming in early morning was territorial announcement, not just feeding. She learned that the flash of blue she kept seeing was a kingfisher, diving for fish in the shallows. One morning, she woke to find a hummingbird at the window, hovering to peer inside with black bead eyes. She stayed perfectly still, enchanted by the tiny creature, by the impossible speed of its wings, by the jewel green of its feathers. It hung there for perhaps 10 seconds before zipping away, but the encounter left her smiling for the rest of the day. The canoe became a daily companion. She paddled every morning, exploring different parts of the lake, learning its moods and changes. She discovered that on calm days, the reflections were so perfect that she seemed to be floating through sky. She discovered that when wind ruffled the surface, the water took on a different character entirely. Livelier, more playful, speaking in wavelets and ripples. She began to understand what Tom had meant about the lake being healing. There was something about being on the water, surrounded by its vastness, that put things in perspective. Problems that had seemed insurmountable in the city, deadlines, conflicts, the endless pressure to achieve and succeed, seemed smaller here, less important. Not because they didn't matter, but because she could see them more clearly, could see that they were just small parts of a much larger whole. Tom visited occasionally, always respectfully, never intruding. He brought fresh vegetables from his garden, showed her how to check the cabin's water pump, taught her where the breaker box was and how to reset it if needed. They fell into an easy friendship, the kind based on comfortable silences as much as conversation. One afternoon, he brought fishing poles and took her out in the canoe, teaching her to cast, to read the water, to be patient. They caught nothing, but it didn't matter. The act of fishing itself was meditative. The rhythmic casting, the watchful waiting, the hope and possibility held in each moment. Sarah found herself thinking less about the city as the days passed. When thoughts of her old life did arise, they seemed distant, like memories from long ago rather than just weeks. She thought about her apartment, sitting empty now, about her job where someone else was surely covering her responsibilities, about friends who had probably stopped wondering where she'd gone. She knew she should feel guilty about this, about the way she'd essentially walked away from her life. But she couldn't summon the guilt. Instead, she felt grateful for the inheritance that had given her this gift, this chance to stop and breathe and remember who she was beneath all the roles and responsibilities she'd accumulated. In the evenings, she often sat on the porch with a book, reading by the fading light until it grew too dim to see. Then she would simply sit in the darkness, listening to the night sounds, watching stars emerge one by one. She thought often about her great-uncle, about the choice he'd made to live this way. She understood now why he'd stayed, why he'd chosen solitude and simplicity over the complications of modern life. It wasn't about running away or giving up. It was about choosing what mattered, about protecting something precious, peace, presence, the ability to simply be. One night, unable to sleep, she climbed the ladder to the loft and began going through the boxes of her great-uncle's belongings. She found photographs, black and white images of a younger man, sometimes alone, sometimes with people who might have been family. She found journals, their pages filled with observations about weather and wildlife, about the changing seasons, about the quiet contentments of his days. In one journal, she found an entry dated 20 years earlier. Another perfect day, fed the birds, paddled to the island, watched the sunset. People in this city think I'm lonely, but they don't understand. I'm not lonely. I'm alone, which is different. I'm alone with the trees and the water and the sky. And that's a kind of fullness they'll never know if they don't slow down long enough to feel it. Sarah closed the journal gently, tears in her eyes. She understood exactly what he meant. She felt it now, that fullness, that sense of being complete in herself, of not needing anything more than this quiet life. These simple days. Sarah woke on a morning 3 weeks after her arrival to find frost on the windows. She could see her breath in the air as she wrapped a blanket around herself and went to look outside. The world had transformed overnight. Every blade of grass, every leaf, every spider's web was outlined in white crystal. The lake steamed slightly in the cold air, and the sun rising over the eastern shore turned the frost to gold. It was breathtakingly beautiful and also a reminder. Fall was coming. Soon the leaves would turn, and then they would fall, and winter would arrive with its cold and snow. She would need to make decisions. She built a fire and made coffee, then sat in the armchair to think. The practical part of her brain listed the reasons to return to the city, her job, her apartment, her life that was waiting for her. She had responsibilities, obligations. She couldn't just stay here forever, could she? But another part of her, a part that had been quiet for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed, asked a different question. Why not? What was waiting for her in the city, really? A job that left her exhausted and unfulfilled. An apartment that had never quite felt like home. friends she'd drifted away from, relationships that had faded through neglect and busyness. A life that had been mostly about survival, about getting through each day, about staying afloat. Here, she had something different. Not easier necessarily. Cabin life had its challenges, and winter would bring more. But something more meaningful. Something that fed her soul rather than depleting it. Over breakfast, she made lists, practical considerations if she were to stay. She would need more firewood, supplies for winter, better understanding of the cabin systems. She would need to officially relocate, to change her address, to tie up loose ends in the city. She would need income, though her savings and the modest inheritance from her great uncle could sustain her for a while. As she figured that out, none of it seemed insurmountable. Difficult, yes, but not impossible. She spent the morning walking, thinking, feeling into the decision. She walked the forest trail, now so familiar she could have navigated it with her eyes closed. She walked down to the lake and stood at the end of the dock, watching fish move in the clear water. She sat on the porch and listened to the silence that wasn't silence, that was full of wind and birds and the subtle sounds of the forest, living and breathing. Around midday, Tom appeared on the trail. He'd brought venison from a deer he'd hunted, packed in ice in a cooler. "Thought you might like some," he said, setting the cooler on the porch. "Winter's coming. Good to stock up." They sat together on the porch steps, and Sarah found herself telling him about her dilemma, about the decision she was trying to make. Tom listened without interrupting, his weathered face thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Can I tell you a story?" he asked finally. Sarah nodded. 40 years ago, I was a lawyer in Boston. Big firm, big cases, big salary. I was successful by every measure the world uses, and I was miserable. He paused, looking out at the lake. I came up here one summer to do some fishing, rented a cabin, spent 2 weeks. When it was time to leave, I couldn't do it. I physically couldn't make myself get in the car and drive back. "What did you do?" Sarah asked. "I called my wife, my ex-wife now, and told her I wasn't coming back. Not to the city, not to the firm, not to that life. She thought I'd lost my mind. My partners thought I was having a breakdown. My family thought I was throwing my life away." He smiled slightly. Maybe they were all right. But you know what? It was the best decision I ever made. Do you ever regret it? Not once. Not even for a moment. He looked at her directly. "Sarah, you already know what you want to do. You're just scared of doing it. Scared of what other people will think. Scared it's the wrong choice. But there's no wrong choice. There's just the life you want, and the life other people think you should want. Only you can decide which one to live." After Tom left, Sarah sat on the porch for a long time. The frost had melted now, and the day had grown warm. One of those perfect early fall days where summer and autumn exist in balance. She thought about fear, how much of her life had been dictated by it. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of making the wrong choice. Fear had kept her in a job she didn't love, in a city that exhausted her, in a life that had felt increasingly like a cage. But here, at the cabin, she'd felt something different. Not the absence of fear, but rather the presence of something stronger, peace, joy, a sense of rightness that went bone deep. As the sun began its descent toward the western hills, Sarah stood up. The decision, she realized, had already been made. Perhaps it had been made the moment she'd first seen the cabin, or the first night she'd slept beneath its roof, or the first morning she'd woken to the sight of mist on the lake. She went inside and found her phone, turned it on for the first time in weeks, and waited while it buzzed and beeped with accumulated messages. She didn't read them. Instead, she called her supervisor at work and gave her notice, her voice steady and calm. She called her landlord and arranged to break her lease. She called a friend and asked if they could pack up her apartment and put her things in storage. Each call was easier than the last. With each one, she felt lighter, as if she were shedding weight she'd been carrying so long she'd stopped noticing it. When she was done, she turned the phone off again and set it aside. She spent the evening preparing dinner from the venison Tom had brought, cooking it slowly with onions and herbs from the garden. She ate as the sun set, painting the sky and lake in shades of rose and gold. After dinner, she went outside one more time. The air was crisp now, carrying the first real hint of autumn. The stars were emerging, bright and clear in the darkening sky. She thought about the seasons to come. Fall would bring color to the forests, the hills blazing with red and gold. Winter would bring snow, transforming the landscape into something magical and pristine. Spring would bring renewal, ice melting, flowers blooming, and summer would bring warmth and long days and the particular quality of light that made the lake shimmer like hammered gold. She would be here for all of it. She would watch the seasons turn, would learn the rhythms of this place in all its moods and changes. She would continue to wake with the sun and sleep with the stars. She would paddle the lake and walk the trails and sit on the porch, watching the world live and breathe. She would be alone, but not lonely. She would be quiet, but not empty. She would be still, but not stagnant. She would be home. Sarah stood for a long time under the emerging stars, breathing the cool air, listening to the gentle lap of water against the shore. A peace settled over her that was deeper than contentment, stronger than happiness. It was a sense of rightness, of alignment, of finally being exactly where she was meant to be. The loon called from across the water, its voice echoing in the stillness. Sarah smiled and went inside. She built up the fire against the evening chill and settled into bed with the quilt pulled up to her chin. Through the window, she could see stars reflected on the lake's dark surface, doubling their number, filling the world with light. Tomorrow would bring its own tasks and pleasures, firewood to stack, winter preparations to make, trails to explore, pages to read, moments to savor. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, there was only this, the warmth of the cabin, the softness of the bed, the gentle sounds of the night, and the deep, abiding peace of knowing she was home. Sarah's eyes grew heavy, her breathing slowed and deepened, and as sleep came to carry her down into dreams, her last conscious thought was one of gratitude for the inheritance that had brought her here, for the courage to stay, for the quiet wisdom of a great uncle she'd barely known, but who had given her the greatest gift, a place to rest, to heal, to remember how to live. She slept deeply that night, and every night after, in the cabin by the lake, under stars that watched over her like ancient guardians, in a peace that would last as long as the water flowed and the trees grew and the seasons turned their eternal wheel.